Hi, my name's Casey. I'm 27 years old. I'm a male to female transsexual, and this is my first video for YouTube. I really haven't had too much practice on my voice yet, so I know it still sounds really guyish. It will probably get progressively more so as this video goes on, because it's really hard to keep it higher pitched for me. But hopefully you'll see a progression as I go through this with more videos, and I'll get better at it. So anyway, I decided to transition about 7 months ago, and I've been on hormones for about 4.5 months. And while I was kind of going through the process of trying to decide to transition, I found YouTube videos to be super helpful. I know there's a lot of people who do, or a lot of trans girls who do vlogs now, and I just kind of wanted to add myself to the mix because I think that you're not going to identify with every single person that you see, but sometimes you'll find one trans person that you'll really click with or you'll really kind of see yourself in, and that can be incredibly helpful. I know it was for me at least. Um, so my goal with these videos is to record kind of my own progress, especially with my voice, but also to try and talk about topics that I kind of wished more people talked about, or that seem to be kind of lacking from some of the other content online. So today I wanted to kind of focus on what went into my decision to start transitioning, because I think that for a lot of trans people, just making the decision to do it is probably one of the hardest things that you can do. Um, and it took me, 27 years to kind of work up the courage and understanding and uh, requisite knowledge to be able to do it. So I'm going to talk about the three biggest things. There's obviously a lot more than just these three things, but these were the three biggest things. Um, the first is that I realized that my feelings were lifelong. So I've wanted to be a girl since I was probably 5, or I don't, some of my earliest memories really, and um, it never went away. It never went away. And I know some people kind of feel it later on. They don't identify their feelings as being trans feelings until later on. Um, but they don't go away. You can try a million and one things to try and repress it. It doesn't work. It never will work. You can read countless experiences by trans people online, from really any age, and you'll see it's the same story over and over again. Um, Repression, and then finally they either admit it and decide to transition or they don't. So I guess over time, you kind of start to realize that you either have to do it or you're going to have to learn to live with feeling this way and not doing anything about it. So I'm going to put a link in the footer here for you guys, that is kind of a study that was done on trans people throughout their lives and kind of what happens if you don't transition, what you can sort of expect if you are truly a transsexual and you decide not to transition. And honestly, it's really terrifying. A lot of cases, people end up committing suicide or ruining their lives in other ways. And for me, kind of finally coming to terms with the fact that if I didn't do something about this, I would just be struggling to repress it or deal with it in other bad ways for forever. It wasn't ever going to go away. There wasn't anything that I could do to make it go away. So, I mean, some of the things that you see some trans people do, get married, have kids, thinking, maybe this will take my focus off the trans feelings, but it won't. Maybe it will temporarily, but it won't ultimately. So that was really the first thing, the realization that these feelings were lifelong. Um, the second kind of realization for me was figuring out that if I don't transition, I'm pretty much guaranteed to be alone forever. And maybe that sounds a little bit harsh, but I was in a relationship for more than 7 years, and honestly, it could have progressed to marriage. It could have progressed to kids. I could have continued going down that path that a lot of people do, kind of just brushing the trans feelings to the back of their mind and trying not to deal with it. But that's a trap. So after that relationship ended, I realized I couldn't enter into another relationship knowing that I was transsexual, living as a guy and pretending like I could be a guy for a woman when that's not ultimately fair to whoever it was that I was dating. If you can't be honest with your partner, you're doing them such a disservice. Honestly, I kind of ended up concluding that I wouldn't be able to date somebody else in good conscience without them knowing that I was a transsexual and knowing that I wanted to eventually transition. Um, so that was number 2. Number 3 was realizing that successful transition, might actually be possible for me. And I think especially early on, when I first realized I was a transsexual, there weren't as many images of younger transsexuals or transsexuals who had really successful transitions that passed really well. It was a lot of kind of older transsexuals who had a more difficult time. So you get this perception that, maybe you can't do it. Maybe you're just going to look like a dude in a dress. And unfortunately, some transsexuals ultimately look like that, but a lot don't. Most don't. If you put in the time and the effort, the money, I think most trans people can end up being passable. So what helped with that was, YouTube videos, girls like Minor Quebec or Fior West Coast. Those were 2 girls in particular that I was super impressed with their progression, and it was inspirational. And then since then, in the past couple of years, there's been so many like timelines, trans timelines or before and after pictures that um, they make you realize like you don't have to start from like this amazing feminine place to ultimately end up being passable or mostly passable, with the time and hormones and effort. So that was the third thing, realizing that there were people my age, similar to where I was when I'm starting, that do it successfully. So those 3 things: feelings being lifelong and realizing that, finally admitting it, um, figuring out that if I didn't transition, that I would likely be alone for the rest of my life, and 3, that it was possible to transition successfully. And that's really it. So those 3 things, kind of once I got them in my head, I realized I have to do this. I have to. And so that's really kind of it for the first video. I'd love for you guys to comment or ask questions or whatever it is. I'd love to keep doing these if they're useful to people. So yeah, and also I'll put a link to my blog. I put a few posts on there that are kind of my history, a bit more about what I talked about today in more detail, and my coming out story. So I'll do a video on coming out too, but all of that's in my blog as well. So this was my first video, and I'm really excited to continue doing this. Hopefully it will be helpful to some people. And that's about it. Thanks a lot, guys.